right, GregJackson.
Hello, hi Alberto, how are you?
long time, huh? Long time.
Yes, sir. That's a fact. That's a fact.
How's New Mexico these days?
It's good. It's pretty crazy with the COVID stuff. The governor is, trying to flatten the curve, so to speak, for COVID. So shuts us down and then opens us up and shuts us down. So it's a little bit of a yo-yo, but we're making it. The fights are still going on, so we just train as best we can under the conditions and try to be as safe as possible. So other than that drama, it's business as usual. So day in and day out, just trying to make it.
Yeah. How many years has it been now that you've been training fighters?
Holy cow, that's a good question. When I opened my school in 92, I can't do math, but it's probably about 5 years, 6 years. Since 1992, that's when I started.
1992. Okay, so that's since we're on the 2020, right? 28 years. 28 years.
28 years. I don't look a day over 29. So
28 years, and it was before they didn't even have, it wasn't even called MMA. It was like Valetudo days in those days.
Right. The early days. It was really interesting in those early days, because as you remember as well, every event had different rules. The kind of the origin of that, the referee rules meeting, is that you would go to these places and you would have no idea, is it closed fist on the ground, open fist, everything goes, what's illegal, headbutts legal. So every event would have totally and completely different rules. And until they unified that, I mean, it was kind of like the Wild West. Wherever you went was just craziness.
You're literally in the wild, in the where the Wild West was, right?
That's right. In the Wild West. Yes, indeed.
Did they have some events we even wear gloves?
Yeah, in those days, no. Most of them you didn't. And they had a lot of kind of the norm in some of the shoot fighting stuff where they would do closed fist to the body and then open hands to the head. So that was pretty common. But then a lot of like the Valetudo rules were pretty much everything goes. I mean, you weren't biting or eye gouging, but yeah, everything else was. It was pretty crazy in those days.
What did the fights look like? What does that change when you don't have gloves on?
Well, it kind of changes everything, especially in today's kind of MMA. People hit so hard that you've got to really worry about breaking your hands. So that was part of it. But most of it's honestly the cuts. You get a lot more cut when you're fighting bare knuckle. There's the wounds seem to bleed more, especially right over your eyes, sometimes up here on the head. So that was one of the big things that I really liked about gloves is it protected the hands first, and secondly, there weren't quite as many cuts as there were before. Still with the elbows you get some, but knuckles it was bad too.
Yeah. What were some of the arenas that you fought that you guys there wasn't even arenas? What kind of fight?
It was I mean, it was sometimes there were crowds, sometimes not. Rodeo rinks, anything like just paying your dues coming up. You haven't lived in the old days of MMA unless you've walked through like cow manure to get to the cage, and with little boards kind of leading up there and stuff. And in those days, in the mid to late 90s, I'd say 95 to maybe just on this side of 2000, there was a lot of that, and some after as well. But these guys couldn't get venues anywhere, and so there was a lot of backwoods would be a strong word, but I guess a lot of venues that you wouldn't see much MMA going on in these days.
Crazy, huh? How it's evolved. Those I'll call those the Gaido Jitsu days.
That's right. That's what they were. That's
before Jackson MMA. Before the Jackson MMA was born.
That was a silly, very young GregJackson. I was like, I should, and when I was younger, it was all about street self-defense stuff. I actually never wanted to be a coach at first, right? I was just trying to be me, and growing up in Albuquerque can be challenging. So Gaido was street and Japanese, and jiu-jitsu was the way of. So I was just a young, stupid kid with a stupid name. Everybody still loves the name though, so there you go. But just dumber than a bag of hammers.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, man. Interesting time. So you going back to your history, you mentioned growing up in Albuquerque, and I always remember you telling me about your parents being pacifists.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that's very true. So I was raised by not just my parents, but there was an entire kind of community of with a Quaker religion, which is a Christian religion that doesn't use preachers. They just kind of sit around, and their belief is they have a direct communication with God as you sit and you're quiet and you listen to what he has to tell you. So that's how I was raised, and they were all professors and doctors and intellectuals. And so there was this big group of kind of pacifist Quakers that raised me. And then the other half of my life, right, was being raised in the South Valley of Albuquerque, which it's a very challenging place, right? It's they pretty much only respect if you can fight. They don't care about anything else. So I had kind of these two worlds that I had to navigate and figure out. And I really respected my parents. I still do, and they were teaching me, happiness comes from helping people. But then the other part of my life was like, well, you've got to help yourself here, because no one's going to be looking out for you out there. And so just navigating those worlds and making mistakes and figuring stuff out. It took me a good minute, because as you know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. So it took a few to get it. But I'm really glad I found my path. I think coaching and teaching is what I'm the best at, because I kind of get the best of both worlds, right? I get a little bit of, well, I was okay at the fighting stuff, but I also get to help people out. So I think I found a good balance. One of the few things I got right.
Yeah, you humble, but we'll get to all the things. So your dad, your uncle, your dad, right? They were all wrestlers.
All of them, yeah. My uncle took D2 nationals. My dad was a state champion in Illinois. My little brother was a state champion here in New Mexico. So yeah, it's a long tradition of wrestling for sure in my family.
And then that kind of guided you. Well, you grew up in the valley, right? So how many white Caucasian guys were there in the neighborhood?
Not many. It was me and let's see, I still have my best friend Mike. But honestly, in that time in the 70s and 80s, I hung out with I had some good Hispanic friends too, but there were one or two black kids and me, and kind of nobody wanted to play with us, so we played together all the time. So I grew up with a great guy all through middle school named Albert Perkins, and then high school Robert Allen. So it was nice to have exposure to other cultures. I really value that. I think that's one thing that the South Valley did give me that I appreciate. It's not just the Hispanic culture, which of course is very rich and has a great tradition, but I got to kind of experience African-American cultures. Going to those churches and stuff was just wild for me, as a young, kind of wide-eyed white kid. It was so informative, and I made so many great friends, and it was just a great time.
Yeah, nice. And I remember you, so how did the whole, school begin? Because you're pretty young, when you started your gym facility. And I remember, you talking about reading judo books, and then, Chris Luttrell, and just the original team that you guys had, right? That you developed.
You have an amazing memory, Bert. I can hardly remember it myself. So I started out really young. I opened a school like 17, 18 years old. And that's just because I was being a dumb kid, and my friends that we were hanging out with, we basically just trained on punching bags and weightlifting, and then we'd fight, and then we'd train, and then we'd fight. So I started trying to figure out how to do that a little bit better. And so my friends wanted to know how I was doing what I was doing. And so I just started teaching them. And we kind of moved on from there. Yeah. And then we had that first generation of kind of the fighters in the mid 90s of 95, 94, 95, great fighters, Tom Vaughn, Chris Luttrell, Brad Aaronsfield. I had this kind of first generation of guys paved the way there. And then, kind of built from there. But the impetus was always for me, again, being a stupid kid at very first, even before MMA was really, really any kind of a thing. For me, it was just self-defense. And I remember when MMA first came out, I was like, that's not realistic. You usually fight 2 or 3 guys. You don't fight, just being a stupid kid, right? Like, I'm always an idiot when it comes to that stuff. But figuring that out, that was super fun for me. I think figuring out the techniques, again, because, you see Sankaku in a judo book, which is a triangle choke, but I have no idea how to really do it. And the Gracie family obviously had a huge influence on me. I mean, watching those guys, I always say seeing those guys, they were like PhDs, and I was like a kindergartner. So seeing where we could go, seeing the power of it, seeing people like you, when you were taking all those world championships, just being inspired by that, knowing that, well, that's, there's something for us here. We should keep trying.
It's remarkable, just the process. And I'm really interested in hearing the process of, going from, a guy from, Albuquerque is a bigger, small town, right? You
Sure.
say that, in the middle of the desert, and it became one of the centers of mixed martial arts in the world famous champions, UFC champions, of going from a guy that, starting his gym at 18 years old and just wanting to know the truth. So where did that, I guess that hunger for the knowledge and to learn and to figure it out, where did that come from?
Well, I think I was always one of my very few defining characteristics is curiosity. I'm always super curious about so many different subjects. So I think curiosity is what drove me first. And then it was driven early on by a very practical need. Like I needed to know how to fight, like for real, like right now, can't wait 3 years. I'm fighting tomorrow, and then again, and then again, and then again. So I think a need was pushed for the martial arts side, and then my natural curiosity kind of added on to that. And then I came at it kind of from an intellectual side as well. I had a great mentor named Jim Dudley who taught me about fractal geometry and philosophy. We'd go hiking in the desert for days and weeks sometimes. And he really taught me. He was a polymath and professor. He's a professor at the University of New Mexico now. He was a math teacher for high school. He's done it all kind of. And so he really instructed me. So I try to bring that analytical kind of intellectual approach coupled with the understanding of what combat really is, the kind of tasting your blood stuff, and combine those two worlds as best I could. And then a lot of it was just trial by fire. I mean, we go to these grappling competitions. You remember in the old days, like the Grappler's Quest and all that. And, we'd win some, and then we'd get caught in the move, and we'd go back and we'd say, well, how did we get, this is before YouTube and everything was on there. So we'd say, how did we get in that move? And we'd figure out counters. And so just I think the growth, the physics and the geometry, understanding the positions and the counters. And probably, honestly, that's the only reason I'm still relevant today, if I am at all. And that because I've never really lost that process of trying to figure out new moves, being taught. And then somebody like you would come and show me, well, here's a cool way to do an Americana. And that would be like, boom, oh my goodness. Here's what Alberto showed me. And then we'd try to riff on that and play all that stuff. So it was and still is something that keeps my mind going. You know what I mean? So you'd have people show you great moves where you'd figure out great stuff. And it's been such a rich experience. Like, I don't know of another job where you can be a professional bum like I am and still be creative and, have things. And it's immediate feedback too. That's the other cool thing about it, right? Is that I can say anything. I can say, well, these moves would work, blah, blah, blah. But until your guys go out and do it consistently, it doesn't matter. You can say anything you want, but to have it proven, to have these ideas go over and over and over and work again and again and again, that's such a rush to know, oh, wow, I figured something out. And then I would also I was sure I'd invent something great. And then I'd run into, again, somebody like you. It would be like, we've been doing that for 13 years, Greg. It's called a Scooby-Doo or whatever move. And I'm like, oh, darn. Okay, well, there you go. I'm way behind the curve. So even just catching up on stuff like that was fun. But I still had fun with it because I felt like I had figured it out, even though much smarter people had figured it out before me. So it's just been an absolute blast.
Like you're acting really humble, and then you always act like that, but it's remarkable how tough of guys you got, how many tough guys you had, how many tough guys you trained, even in those early days. We went, going the Grappler's Quest, I feel like we're later, much later, but
yeah.
Just guys that you created. I mean Keith Jardine's not even first generation, right? But just so many tough guys and good basics, really good conditioned, just tough, really tough minded, yeah, you bred some really tough guys, and it was really impressive considering you never trained really with, any Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts. And, I know Chris Lachelle traveled around and stuff and learned some things, but doesn't take away from just you guys, learning on the fly, you guys go to a tournament, somebody gets caught in something, breaking it down, figuring out a counter, and then just everything that you guys developed, not to go go on and on about it, but like it's really
well,
crazy. Impressive.
I don't know about that. I was just really lucky. I got in early. I was really lucky. What's cool is that no one person has had a whole hand in it. We had so many people come. I mean, you're a huge contributor there too. You really brought us to another level. So many people came, and people like Chris did have an influence, but so did you. So did so many other people. I mean, it was such a pleasure to work with so many people that had so many great ideas. And that's why I'm humble, because I never feel like it was me. I feel like all these people, I mean, I figured some stuff out, but all these people came in and really helped me for nothing. I mean, you never asked anything from me. You just helped me, show me moves and stuff. And like the contribution over the years from that, I'm always humbled by. And as for the tough-minded stuff, I mean, that's just me being a young kid figuring out, well, this is what I got to do. So this is, I guess, what fighting is. So I'll try to teach that, and bring out people's kind of mental edge.
How did you meet Mike Winkeljohn?
So Wink was thinking about competing in MMA as well. He was boxing and kickboxing. And so one of our students introduced us, and we hit it off right away. When he was still boxing and kickboxing, I'd get in there and spar him and stuff and just have a great time. He'd take me running in the mountains, and he's really what taught me long conditioning. Before him, I didn't do those mountain runs where, we'd be going all day up the mountains, which we kind of got famous for later. But he was the one that really helped me out that. And then he just gave me a lot of basics. I was really a wild street fighter before that. I mean, my ground was okay. My kickboxing was okay, but they were just both okay, right? Like, he's the one that said, hey, maybe you should set up a leg kick before you just start bombing them on people, that kind of stuff. So he really took me, and again, another person that really took me to the kind of that next level, and just giving me strong basics, giving me ways to think about setting up my moves a little bit better. So it was really a benefit. And we've been, I don't know, partners for 20 some years now. So it's worked out.
Yeah. What a story. I mean, I remember back in the day, I mean, you had all these fighters. You had your daughter. She was, I think, at the beginning when I first, met you. Well, even before that, I think, but she was a baby. And you had all these gnarly fighter guys staying, in your guest houses, your guest house, your guest room, your house. Just you really gave everything you had, to having these fighters be their best, right? And to do something. And when there was no money, there was zero money.
Zero is the word. There's still not a lot, but it was zero in the day. Well, we lost money more than we got in those days, for sure.
Yeah. So what was your motivation? If thinking back, what was your motivation? What was the goal, in those days?
So for me, I think, being from New Mexico, you have a kind of a chip on your shoulder, right? So you want to prove that what you're doing works. I think I had a couple of motivations. One is I really wanted to help people. As you know, I really like doing that. It gave me a thrill to help people along their journey. But a lot of it, I think, was just the experimentation. Was just like, will these things work? Like the fight to me has always just kind of been a scientific process, wherein you have a theory, you go and you have will it work? Why did it work? Why didn't it work? I mean, it really is the scientific process just broken down. So you get there's a thrill there when you figure out a move or you figure out a game plan or whatever it may be, and then it works. But not just once, right? It works twice. It works 3 times. You're like, oh, wow, that's such a thrill. But I think that helped motivate me too, kind of through the dark times, is to see not only among my friends being successful, but things that I had thought of were successful as well. And man, it's a rush. It's a rush that's hard. I'm still addicted to it all these years later, 30 years later.
That's crazy. Yeah. I forgot to ask you when you were talking about fractal geometry, how does that relate to fighting?
Well, it really relates to, it relates in a lot of ways, but the way I use it the most is game tree decisions. So you want to get to these little nodes that maximizes your, the moves that you have within the space that you have. And so one thing the fractals does is it, we'll be here all day, but like leaves on a tree, the tree tries to maximize as much sunlight as it can get in that little space by not just going in a straight line, right, but by going up and down and up and down and up and down. So putting yourself in maximizing these decision positions where you have 3 or 4 things, so you never just have one option, for me is a very fractal idea. So constantly keeping that in mind, like I want to make sure that I have as many moves as I have within the confines of this position. And how can I do that? Both negatively, like suckering people in, pushing people out, whatever I need to do to adjust that position to maximize my move count is one example, an easy example of how I use fractals in fighting.
I've never heard, it's path of least resistance, right?
Right. So if you have 3 or 4 paths of least resistance, that would be nice, right? So that's what we do. We're just maximizing our ability to adapt, the ability to get to sunlight.
Like I went to like a faster conference some years back, and just how as we have the technology to see the imaging right now, we see how even our bodies are, and just everything's fractal geometry, right? The earth, like the land, the coastline,
everything. Yeah, my man, you do.
Yeah, I'm studying, right?
All right, my man, look at you. All right, that's exactly right.
Just like how the island of England is, right? How it's just
right. Like, the farther you go out and the closer you go in, it gets farther. Yep.
And to hear that, like in terms of martial arts and with the way water, right, move like water,
right.
Say fractal geometry, and that's it, right? That's life itself, right?
It is, and that's what's cool about like nonlinear dynamics. The way I bring nonlinear dynamics into, which a lot of people call chaos theory, is just these kind of strange attractor positions. You're going to find yourself back in these positions over and over, side mount or whatever it is. So being able to predict you're getting to those positions. Again, we'll be here all day, but it's really cool to see how science influences martial arts. But again, if you have a completely quote unquote scientific stale, environment or student that doesn't push hard, that doesn't, once the adversity comes, doesn't push back, that only goes so far. So it has to be held in balance with kind of your mental side of it, the science on the mental side as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and then I remember there was a question I asked you back, because I asked you now, like, what was your mindset of your goals, right, back in those days?
Yeah.
But now I'm asking you, but I asked you back then. I remember a question I asked you, Greg, what are your goals? Because you had, like I said, these fighters. You had your daughter; she was a baby at the time. It was even before your son was born. What's your goal with this, right? What's your goal? And you're like, I just want to be known as the best, MMA fighter. Like Pat Miletich was the king at that time. He
right, yeah, for sure.
And I was like, okay, cool, but I didn't really believe in MMA because it was very underground, right? It was like they were fighting in Alabama, and it was underground.
Really they were. Yep. Well, that sounds right. I think I wanted to be the best, and I still do want to be the best. Like that should be everybody's aspiration. If you get up in the morning, and I've learned over the years that the best just means that I need to be the best that I can be at it, right? But yeah, I think that it's very important to set goals way beyond what you think you can do. I think that's huge. I think if you're like, listen, if you're in a battle and your goal is to make it through the day, that might be more than you can do, but that's the goal you've got to set. Or you can set ridiculous goals like I do, where I'm like, oh, I want to be one of the best in the world at this thing. And which is a ridiculous goal for a skinny guy from the South Valley. But it was kind of so far out of my purview, and I kept chasing it down that hopefully one day I'll get there.
Just at the time, I didn't believe, like I was a jiu-jitsu guy, but I didn't really believe in the potential or any future really in MMA. I'll be honest. That was my
man, and you're completely right to think so, especially at that time. Holy cow!
That time, and I did one fight, I think maybe a couple fights at that point, but I just didn't believe in, or maybe I haven't even fought yet, but I didn't know where it was going to go, right?
Right.
Did you always feel like it was going to go somewhere?
No, actually, and I'm famously bad for not calling trends. I remember what really changed everything, in my opinion, since I was there before and after, was the Ultimate Fighter TV show.
Right.
And I remember when Diego Sanchez wanted to go to it, Mask and all the tap out guys were saying, hey, Diego, you should go do this thing. And for me, I was like, that's a stupid reality show. You should go to Are You a Fighter or a Reality Star? Just not understanding anything, which is as usual. And so even before that, which is like 2004, 2005, if I remember correctly, Anyway, somewhere around there. I'm not sure that I would have thought, oh, it would have exploded like this. I had no idea. I mean, I remember being literally shocked when people knew what MMA was, that I didn't have to explain it to them, right? Like that it was so huge after The Ultimate Fighter. That's for me when things changed. But up until 2004 or 5, whatever year that was, I'd been doing it for 10, 12 years and just thinking, oh, this is what I was going to do with my life. I'm having a great time. I'm making enough money to eat and feed my family. So that was it. I honestly had no idea it was going to go anywhere. And if it wasn't for Dana White and for the Ultimate Fighter show, it still probably wouldn't go anywhere.
Yeah. That's crazy, right? You had those white mats.
Yeah, that's right.
San Mateo.
That's right. That is old school. That is 94 probably. Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah, those things were gymnastic mats because they didn't make, it was either that or the judo ones, and the judo ones like tore you up a little bit. So I got those white gymnastic mats, and that was pretty much it. I had a desk. My whole school at that point was like 1,200 square feet, maybe 1,000 square feet. And I lived in like 300 square feet of it in the back there. I had my little stove and everything back there. And I ate bologna sandwiches, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Had some tuna fish. On Wednesdays, if I had money left over, I had a little treat. And then I could pay one bill a month. I could pay the rent, or I could pay all the electricity and everything else, or my car payment. So I would just rotate them around and almost go out of business every month. It was great. I loved it.
Do you ever drive by the old location, the original location?
I do. There was a grape arbor, like the guys that make your own beer, and you make your own beer, make your own wine, and they actually took the space over. So maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I asked them, hey, can I see the old space? And of course, it looks a lot different, but a lot of it's still the same. And it was just cool I took both of my kids down there to show them kind of where I got my start. And it was cool just to sit down in that old place. And, 27 years ago, there was a very young GregJackson.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we moved the white mats out.
That's right.
Scraped them out underneath off the floor. And
that's right.
Where did we move them to? The the address for that? Is a suit?
It was literally in the same mall. We just went to the other end of it, and then
that's right.
Right, and then we stayed there for a year or two, and then we went to the big place on Acoma.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, that was. I remember when we moved, it was such a big deal. I finally got enough money. MMA was starting to warm up a little bit, and I finally got enough money to move into a bigger place. And I thought that was going to be it. I thought, wow, I'll be here, and this will be great. And then it kept growing. So there you go.
Man, and we were doing. I have some old footage of us doing police. For the state police, some like techniques and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We kind of
that's right. That's right. Wow, that was a few years ago. That's right. I still actually do that. The other half of my life, I'm very lucky. I work with police departments and with some special forces guys, and so I'm really. That's really fun for me because it's so different than MMA, right? It's like night and day different. So because you have different tools, different parameters, so it keeps my mind going. MMA can get a little stale for me sometimes. So just being able to step outside and say, okay, for police officers, these need to be, you only have a 2-week training course. So this needs to be your curriculum. You can't go crazy with these techniques. You've only got 2 weeks and then you hardly ever train it after that. For SF guys going into rooms or doing whatever, you have to do things very differently. So it's been a super, super lot of fun, and actually has kept me kind of mentally sane to have that half of my life as well, where I work with the police and the SF guys.
Yeah, I learned a lot of stuff from you. Just stuff that's efficient. Because I came up through the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Gracie family, and then of course we did a lot of sport, competitions and things like that. But just gonna have like a street perspective, and stuff that works actually in the situation that you're in, right?
Right.
You're on, And I learned a ton of stuff kind of working with you. I remember that. And just,
oh, that's nice of you to say.
Come on, on that's just not one front, Let's not talk about the whole fighting MMA stuff, So yeah, man. And then time went. Then Diego won the Ultimate Fighter, and that changed the trajectory. That put New Mexico on the map.
It really did. It really well. And people like you have been putting New Mexico on the map. Like anybody that knew about New Mexico.
I was your first. Well, King of the Cage was a big deal back then,
That's
right?
it. Yeah, it was an organization. You were the guy there. Don't forget that. You were the first guy to get that title there. So even before Diego.
Yeah,
yes. You were, seriously, like, take that credit, man. I was there with you. You were the first one there. So you really, and you were taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world championships and stuff before any of us even were in that level. So yeah, like, you were the real first guy there. And then everybody kind of came behind that, especially as it really began to evolve and become what mixed martial arts is, more than just a bunch of kind of wild guys being wild. So that was huge. And then, yeah, for Diego, it was a big deal for us, because suddenly, and we had been doing okay in those grappling competitions, like the Grappler's Quest and all the other ones. And that's where all Mask and all the tap out guys kind of took us under their wing. Again, another great contributor to our careers. And they are the ones that got Diego into that show based on basically that. He had done some fighting as well, but just the grappling competitions, all that kind of stuff was able to elevate us there. And then, after that, it kind of blew up. It went a little crazy for sure.
Yeah, it's because you guys, you put out good grapplers, good submission fighters.
Yes. We were all right. Yeah, we did okay. We won. I think we might still have the team record there. Probably not, but they inducted me into the Hall of Fame and everything. It was sweet of them. They didn't have to do that, but yeah, it was definitely a great time. And like you said, losing money every time. We'd all get in a van, lose money in the hotels, lose money in the thing, and we just had a blast doing it.
Man, what year was that? That was about 2000. The Grappler's Quest started around probably 2000. 2001, 2000.
Yeah,
2000. It started
2000.
2000.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Wow. Holy cow. Every time I don't feel old, then I suddenly feel old again. Yeah, it was probably, and we would go to all of them, and we just had a blast doing it. So, in some tournaments, we'd have a great tournament and do well. And sometimes we'd be like, oh man, we'd get caught left and right. And, it happens as you evolve. And, but just the whole experience. And actually, that's probably where I learned to be a decent coach. Is I would always argue, because again, I'm a skinny white kid. I still don't have any belts in jiu-jitsu at all. And so there were some people there that would get upset that they would lose to one of our guys. And so I'd have to argue with them over and over again about points and this and that and the other thing. So I learned to be a good debater.
You didn't get the respect because of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You don't have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. So
exactly.
I that's why I trained with you, because I saw your guys, and I saw what you got. The stuff when you showed me stuff. I was like, man, this. I don't know. He has these white mats, and he's talking all this geometry mat stuff. Man, they're tough, and he's smart. He's a thinker.
I don't know about all that, but we were very blessed to have you there. That's for sure. It was very blessed.
Train on those white mats, those foldable mats.
But they were gymnastic mats. Mancino, I still remember them.
Foldable mats next to a make your own wine store.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the heart of Albuquerque, it was nuts, man. It's craziness. I don't know how we got anywhere.
And putting guys in the UFC and becoming like the center, really, for some, like, quite a few. I mean, till now today, right? UFC champions, but becoming the center, you guys were the who's who of that time before you were even organized. So
yeah, no, it was a wild. The explosion after that 2005 was wild. I mean, you remember it. It was it almost overnight. Everything changed. It was craziness, and I attribute that 100% to that reality show. I mean, that was the best thing that ever happened to MMA, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so Diego got on, then Keith Jardine.
Yep.
And then next thing I knew, I see George St-Pierre. I had moved to LA by that point,
Uh-huh.
What was that? How did the team, or this international, team kind of get assembled?
Well, in the earlier days, we had gone to Montreal a lot. They used to have a TKO. Stefan Patry out there ran that. And so we would go compete there a lot, and compete against a lot of the Canadians. And they were always super tough, super great guys. And so that's where I kind of met George. Again, it's kind of like the Grappler's Quest and all these other tournaments we were doing. We would go and we did pretty well. So I met him there, and then he really got on with the rest of the team, with Rashad and Keith and everybody else. So we kind of arranged for him to come down to Albuquerque, and he would train at the team, and I would go up to Montreal and help him out there. And we just clicked. It was a great partnership. I was, again, so grateful that somebody of that caliber wanted to work with me. It was just kind of unbelievable. You have to pinch yourself, you know what I mean? Like, so it was a great time. And I mean, it was a testament to as good as the team was, because, man, George St-Pierre did not like Albuquerque. When you go in Montreal and you go out to the nightclubs, everybody's friendly, and, there's some scuffles here and there, but you can relax there, just have a good time and hang out with your friends. And as you know, in Albuquerque, the ability to relax at nightclubs is kind of a little harder, especially if they know you're a fighter. So he did not enjoy the nightlife as much in Albuquerque as he did in Montreal. So that he came down at all and trained with us was just more a testament to his great teammates. It was a fun time.
Yeah. How did John Jones come over?
Well, Faraz actually was the guy that said, "Hey, Greg, you need to." Faraz is George's other coach, along with other, great guys. George had such a who's who of coaching. Danaher, Phil Nurse, John Chamber. He had such a great coaching team. But he said, "Hey, take a look at this guy. I want to introduce you to him." And so I came down, and I think the first time I saw John, and I could be mistaken about this because it was some years ago, but I think he was going like 2 days before his fight, just going life and death grappling match with Mark Coleman. They were just going like crazy down there. And so I was like, oh, wow, you could see the potential in him. And again, I just met him. I said, "Hey, if you ever want to come down, we'd love to have you." And he was very friendly. And so, again, we just kind of clicked right away. And then he went to train with Faraz for a little bit and came and trained with me for a little bit. And it was we got along well, and the rest is history.
Did he have any fights at that point?
Yeah, he was already in the UFC. I think he'd already had 1 or 2 fights when I met him. So just a lot of raw talent. Obviously, you look at that guy and you're like, oh my God, he's something special. And so, again, a guy like that wanting to work with me, I don't know how I keep lucking out. You started it, Al, and then it keeps going for me. I don't know.
You always had that talent of seeing talent, having talent of seeing talent or finding talent.
No, I think that's really it.
A raw, like seeing a diamond in the rough, for example.
With coaches too, I think that's my only the thing I'm really good at is knowing how good other people can be. And I think that's my gift, is that I can see in you, oh, here's greatness in somebody. And then hopefully I can help them bring that out. But seeing somebody's strength inside of them and seeing their potential, I think is if you were going to, I'm very curious as a person, but what makes me any good at my job is that.
What are some qualities you see in somebody that has a lot of potential? What are some?
The number one is the strength. Like, you have to have a strong mental. As you know, the fight game's brutal. Even if you're making money, it's a brutal game. So that inner strength is something that I look for. And I can't put a defining quality on it, but I can look at somebody and say, or watch them go through something and say, okay, this guy's tough. This girl's tough. This person has that. Then you have to have obviously a willingness to learn. You have to have, it's a weird dichotomy. You have to have a huge ego and no ego at all. So you have to have a huge ego. Like, I can beat all these guys. I can do this. And then still be able to put yourself in a humble position where you're learning and helping, that kind of thing. So I think that's a hard line to kind of run. And if you can do that well, then you seem to excel. But sometimes people go too far on one side or the other of that line and not reach their potential. So looking for that, I think is super important. And then honestly, as I get older, dealing with your life outside of the fight. So a lot of times fighting is the easiest thing for some of these guys. That's the only time they're really happy, is performing in front of people, getting that kind of adulation. But I think outside the cage sometimes is where those guys get defeated. So you have to have such a combination of mental toughness, talent, the ability to have an ego and no ego at the same time, and then be able to handle your life outside of the cage. And then you're good. And then if you still have a really good talent, you could be something great.
On the mental strength, is it something you feel, or how could you feel it?
I think at this point, and I could be wrong, but I think at this point it's pattern recognition. I see the same pattern in strong people over and over and over again. So I will say, oh, this person is, like you or Diego or Keith, or even today in John, or a lot of these new guys I have coming up. I recognize that strength. I see them, the way they act in situations kind of over and over and over again. And then refining that, like, how do I bring that out of people? Because the other thing is people can start off with being okay mentally strong, but if you put them through a crucible, if you really break them down and build them up and break them down, you can get people to a very, very high level of mental strength. I know, because I've done it. So that some people are born, it's like a talent, right? Some people are born with more of it, just being mentally stronger, some people with less. But I've seen people with less mental strength become stronger than people that are born with it but don't try to develop it at all.
Just, I'm curious what the patterns are, that you see, the just the patterns.
Yeah, that's so intangible. It's almost an intuition.
Right. So you feel it.
Right. Like, it's got to be some kind of subconscious pattern recognition that I'm going through. I mean, sometimes obviously you see people go through hard times and they're resilient. So that's a no-brainer. But sometimes it's just the way they deal with their teammates, or the way they deal with the press, or their personal life, or practice. Like when you see them grind it out and they get up and they grind it out the next day without saying, oh, my toes hurt, coach, I'm going to go play video games for 2 days, or whatever it is. Just little indicators, I think. I've actually never really sat down and cataloged them. That'd be interesting to do. And then some of it's just got to be a subconscious intuition that my brain has seen so many fighters over the last 30 years. I can say, oh, that guy's going to be successful.
I think at this point you're pretty high up there, maybe the most experienced corner man. How many weekends or how many events you think? I mean, I don't know if you've ever calculated it. At your heyday, the most busiest time of your life, how many events did you corner people on a year?
There was probably 15 years there where it was every weekend somewhere else. And pretty much, and as you remember, I'd have 6-8 guys on a card as well. Right. So I don't think anybody, because there's so many teams now. In the old days, there was just a couple of us. So I don't think anybody will be able to catch my record anytime soon as far as amounts of cornering that I've done, just because I didn't have a life for, 15 years of every weekend. There was another event over and over and over and over and over again. We tried to count it and just stopped at one point. Because again, I can't remember half of them. I mean, there's so many of them. People will be like, hey, do you remember this event in 2003 in Shreveport or something? And I'll be like, nope, I have no memory of doing that. I mean, I know I was there, but
Shreveport is in Louisiana, right?
Right. Yeah. So
we had dinner there. We had dinner there after many years. I went, yeah, it was a Bellator. Huh. I had like some deep conversation with you. It was a random place, right? Random place, and we just randomly happened to just sit down next to each other at the restaurant, and then that together and kind of caught up, because I was living in LA.
Right.
It was a Bellator event, and my friend, he was fighting in it, and he didn't make the weight. It was, kind of crazy. And then your guy, it was very, very interesting. And you're already like so deep into the game, so many years already in the game. I mean, every weekend, like you're saying, you were in the middle of those 15 years.
It was crazy. It was crazy for a little while there. It was absolutely nuts. So I've got to be over 1,000 corners at least. 1,500, I don't know, but it's definitely got to be over $1,000.
Yeah, interesting. And you were saying to me at that point, you're like, yeah, I think the guy, if guys lose or they don't do well, like you still care, like you're already kind of deep at that point in the game of, just it's a lot of reps, a lot of corners.
It really is. Yeah.
What keeps you going?
I think at that point, stubbornness, tenacity kind of stuff, but also just that when you're chasing down something you really love doing, it's not as hard as I think that maybe other people would think it is, right? Just because I was having such a great time doing it. So, and just, it was kind of a single-minded determination. Like, I wanted to be the best I could be, and I still do. Just so that meant to me grinding and pushing as hard as I possibly could. It was just a work ethic, I guess, that I was lucky enough to have. And so, yeah, for those years, I couldn't imagine not doing it. I couldn't imagine a weekend not being in a fight somewhere at some show and not grinding it out. That would be foreign to me. So I think I loved it, and I think I was just stubborn, like just kept pushing no matter what.
You know, going back to that question I asked you, what's your goal back in before, you know, the Ultimate Fighter, before, you know, it was still Gaijutsu at the time. It was like Gaijutsu days. You know, and saying like, you know, I want to be known as like the best coach in MMA and have the best team and all that, you know. And for me, I was living in LA already at that time, you know, but you were voted like the best MMA coach by as a Fighters Only magazine, and you know, across the board, you had, I mean, you had like, I don't know how many UFC champions at that time.
Yeah, I don't know either.
It was a few. Yeah, you had a few at the same, you know. And going back in the day, you know, Pat Miletich had, you know, not Yves Edwards, Jens Pulver, Tim Sylvia, Matt Hughes.
Yeah,
you know, he was the guy, right? The Miletich, you know, there's Miletich team, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that was your. I think maybe he inspired you, right? To kind of
for sure.
I want to be like that. I want to be like
Absolutely.
that. You even mentioned his name, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And then so you know, and then just going fast forward. I don't know if it was like 10 years already at that time. You know, I think it was 10 years at that point, maybe a little less. But you know, being recognized and then having all these UFC champions, and then I watched a movie called Warrior.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They play the symphony, you know, and
Beethoven's Ninth. Yeah.
You know, and he gets his coach, and I'm like, man, that's GregJackson.
Good eyes. Yeah. Frank Grillo, who played the coach, kind of followed me around for a couple of months and trained with me and met my parents, and just, he even got my silly duck walk that I do, you know, that weird walk I have, and he went all in on it. So I made a lot of great friends on that movie. And again, there was another thing that the Tap Out crew brought me into. Just meeting Gavin, the director, and all the great actors that I've stayed in touch with over the years. That led to the Frank was also involved in the Kingdom TV show, which has made another resurgence. So I worked on all the scripts on that. So that was kind of my, like, as you know, I don't like a lot of attention. I don't like being in front of the camera. They made me do a cameo on that TV show, but I'm much happier being behind the scenes and figuring stuff out and stuff. So that's also been super fun because it's something different, right? It keeps my mind going. So just doing with the Hollywood, doing the fight scenes, I had to go do all the fight scenes for Tim Kennedy had a movie called Range 15. And so I went there and did a bunch of fight scenes for those guys on like 3 days notice. And so just doing that Hollywood stuff, super fun. I was a stuntman for one day. I tried that out to see if I was any good at it. So it was just trying that stuff out. You know what I mean? Like it's just fun to do, but it's nothing. I could never be a career guy in Hollywood. I'm not a very talented actor at all. I had a hard time playing myself. I'm not a particularly good stuntman, but it was super fun. I mean, I helped with the writing, but it was super fun just to try those worlds out to see, oh, this is what they do. And again, being curious, I just wanted to kind of see what it was about. So it was super cool.
Did you ever have that idea in your head back in those days, the Gaijutsu days?
No, God, no. Again, I mean, you were there, so I was just some skinny white kid. Like, I was just happy that really, and this is an honest truth, I was happy that we were winning, and I was happy that I had enough money to eat. Like, that is as far as my view went. I was just so grateful that I didn't have to. I did all kinds of jobs to save money. I was a security guard. I painted houses. I worked at a video store renting videos. That's how old that is. For those of you kids that are listening, they used to have VHS tapes, and you would put them in a little machine. And I would rent those out. So I did all these jobs, construction, all these jobs that I could do just to save money to get my gym going. And then when I made a living, I remember sitting on my golf cart in the security job that I had in the South Valley. It was a terrible job. And just imagining if I had 10 students and I charged them each $100 a month, that'd be $1,000. Like, just blowing my own mind. Like, if I could do that, I could make real money. And so those dreams and stuff, I think, of just being able to do what I love and get paid for it was that I got to do that was super cool.
So fractal geometry, quantum physics, and ghost towns. So we talked a little bit about fractal geometry without going too far down the rabbit hole. I want to hear about quantum physics, and then we'll get to ghost towns.
Well, quantum physics for me is what blew my mind about that is how anti-intuitive it is, and it taught me really to keep an open mind on what you think reality is, right? So when I first learned about quantum mechanics, I learned through Jim Dudley and then reading myself, and you realize, well, everything's just buzzing around, really. There's more space in between the chair that I'm sitting on than there is actual chair. And things like that, just I couldn't handle it. My intuition couldn't handle that real well. And I took that kind of those lessons that I learned, and I applied them into fighting in pragmatism and optimism. Because you can think on paper what something is, right? So if you're a pragmatist and you say, well, and you need pragmatism to train, obviously, and to fight. You need A leads to B, B leads to C, and you have this very kind of linear progression. Optimism is, well, I'm just going to win the fight no matter what. And one of the best examples of that is when Rashad Evans fought Chuck Liddell. One of the few times where the MMA press, well, I guess more than a few times, they when I would get interviewed for that, they treated me like I was the biggest idiot they'd ever met. They were like, Rashad just takes people down. You're not going to take Chuck Liddell down, and then Chuck's going to knock Rashad out. Like, what you're putting your guy in to die, like just get killed. And then of course Rashad knocked out Chuck Liddell, and that's optimism versus pragmatism. Because on paper, right. Yeah, that's exactly right. But then the optimism is, well, no matter what that is, I'm still going to get that. So the anti-intuitive nature of kind of quantum mechanics, which I still follow today, I'm a huge fan. I don't fan out to actors, and I don't really fan out to fighters, but I fan out to scientists a lot. Like, I'm a huge Roger Penrose fan. I'm that guy's biggest fan since I was a kid. That guy's had so many things named after him. MC Escher, my favorite artist, like literally did his diagrams based on his ideas. He's insanely cool. So that for me is more about remembering that your perception isn't necessarily reality. And I think that's super important, because the chair has more space in it than it has matter. That really helped me out with fighting, with the underlying understanding what fighting really is, right? Like, this is something that the MMA media especially will just sit around and talk about, well, he jabs 75% of the time, and then he counters this. And so, all those analytical breakdowns are correct, right, but they don't have the psychological component, right? Like, who's the optimist here? Who's going to be able to push through that kind of thing? So it's important to remember, I think, in that case.
I've gone to some, courses and conferences with some really, really smart people, and the Nobel Prize nominees and things like that. Scientists like that. And one thing that I've taken from it is that they're always humble enough to say, we think, but we don't know. They have
Right. Well, isn't that huge? Right? Because I always say ignorance isn't the problem with people. You can say, I don't know. There's so much I don't know. I mean, I know nothing about a gi stuff. Like right now, you could put you do jiu-jitsu too, but anything you put on me, there's so much I don't know. I'd be like, wow, that's amazing. But it's when you have the illusion of knowledge. Oh no, I got that. I know that. No, I know this. That's always, I think, what catches people is it's not so much ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Like, no, you actually don't know. That you don't. Like, nobody can, and you certainly don't. So I think what a great thing you said right there. I think that's kind of the cornerstone of being open to change and growth and all that stuff. And when you say, no, I've got it, that's when things go bad.
Yeah. Interesting, right? Perception is not reality, right?
Right.
But so something can be totally fake and you think it is, but it's actually not, right?
Right. Totally. 100%.
And like wrestling or fighting or combat arts, like, man, that's such the example of I don't know, quantum physics, like you just find a way to win. Like all the cards are stacked up against you, right? As you're gonna lose, like a Rashad Evans example.
Yeah.
Liddell. You're like, I don't know, or Holly Holm with Ronda Rousey. Right?
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah.
Kind of shocked the world, and I mean, it's such a great example of like, you don't know how, but you're gonna do it. Well, you guys knew how with I feel like Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm. You guys have been planning that. you know, because I live out here in LA, and so it's kind of like I had known, I know you guys have been training, game planning. I mean, that was like you should probably start even fighting, right? To probably fight Ronda Rousey at that, because she hadn't done MMA, and then when she got into it, it's probably she's been training for that fight to get that fight, right? Before she did the MMA fight.
Yeah, no, she was really, the thing about Holly is she's so tough and so brave. I remember how nervous she was for that fight, but she did it anyway. It's one of my favorite things about Holly is that she's unbelievably brave. Like, you can put a ton of pressure on her. You can put her a lot going on in her life, and she'll always compete her best. And so, that was an example of that for me, where it really came to her moment. And she executed. She had a great night that night. I wish they could all be that great.
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy trajectory, right? From stellar, right, boxing and kickboxing career to getting into MMA, and then leading up to that fight, right?
It was amazing. It was amazing. No, it's one of a lot of fights I can't remember because there's been so many, but there's some fights that I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good night. I remember that well. So that was definitely one of them.
Yeah. Australia. What was that? What was it like after the fight?
For me, sometimes you go in with a calm. Like, I just felt like we were going to win. I just felt that. So I was actually weirdly calm about it. Like, and maybe it's because we had some other upsets before, like again with Rashad and some other ones have been in the past where people were like, oh, there's no way you're going to do this. George St-Pierre, when he fought Koscheck, both times really, but especially the first time. So I guess I had been there a couple times where I was more calm than I thought I'd be. Mr. Winklejohn and Izzy and everybody else were kind of Barata. Everybody was losing their mind. But I was, for that one, for some reason, I was really calm. I'm not sure why, but I just felt like it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Yeah, it was meant to be. It was the perfect storm in a way, right?
Right. Yeah.
She had been just, she was like the Mike Tyson of
just dominating. Yeah.
And then, sure enough, it reminds me a little bit about the Buster Douglas. And I mean, not that she's Buster Douglas, but
right. Like, no, but that kind of an upset,
right? And also that it was like abroad in Australia, not on this side of the world, Yeah, really, really crazy. It's congratulations, again, another New Mexico, feather in the cap, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, we've been lucky to be a part of them. And Australia, I love Australia. It's like my second home. So couldn't happen in a better place.
Right. Let's talk about that real quick. Back in the day, you guys went to Australia and you met, what's his name? Irwin.
Steve Irwin. Yeah, for sure.
Irwin. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
How was that? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, Steve was just an amazing guy. First of all, what a privilege to be his friend. He had his best friend. He had two real best friends, like Wes Mannion, who managed, an amazing guy, and of course Terry, his wife. And just meeting him, being able to go out a couple times every year to hang out with him and his friends and his family. And get to, interact with the animals. It was just such a once in a lifetime event. There'll never be another. I will never find myself in a situation with a guy outside of fighting like that. So it was such a special time for me. And he was so kind and so, and his whole family and all his friends are so kind and so open. They didn't have to be that way. So every time that they would fly me out there to hang out, they showed me the time of my life. And we would train in the mornings, and he can fight. Believe me, that dude hit hard. He hit me a few times really hard. So he was a great fighter. And just to see how authentic he was. Here's the thing about him. Like, I think people would say, oh, well, maybe him getting on TV and defying death and doing all that stuff and being so animated was an act, he was a performer. But he really wasn't. Like, that was, if anything, he toned it down for the TV. So he just an amazing guy. Like, I wish I could, it's hard to articulate, incredible, just an incredible human being. A once in a lifetime guy that you get to hang out with. And so I still have a picture of he and I together, catching crocs and doing stuff. So it was, I'll always remember it with such such a warm place. And he really was into, how can we restrain these crocodiles with the least amount of trauma to them so that the scientists they put these little trackers on their scoots, on their little back things. And so it was kind of up to me to try to figure out how can we pin these animals down without hurting them. And then so the scientists could get their data on it. It was super fun, just great.
I remember back in the day. What was his bodyguard? It was his bodyguard, his security.
Yeah, Dan Higgins. Yeah, yep.
Dan Higgins. Yeah. So I just remember how big of a deal, how excited you were back then. You know, that was
Still
the first
excited.
time going down, and you took your whole family down, and just to hear you all these years later, be just as excited is really cool.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. Just thank God I met him, really, and I still have friendships from that time. So what a gift! I can't. It was pretty devastating for me when he passed. You know, there's a lot more people a lot closer to him than I was, but just personally, he gave me so many gifts that that one was a good gut punch.
And lastly, I wanted the ghost towns.
Oh yeah. So ghost towns, as you know, in being from New Mexico, we have a very low population density, and I think we're the fourth biggest state. So we have all of these kind of open desert areas with these old towns. Native Americans, of course, have been here for thousands of years. And then the Spanish came in and they had little towns that the conquistadors left, or they, as they became integrated into the Spanish Empire. And then you have the Anglos came through and they had towns on their way to gold rushes, or, just continuing any kind of mining and stuff they did here. So you have so many different generations of these old towns that are just sitting out in the desert. And so I would go to the University of New Mexico. They have this place called Magic, which is the map room. And you get these old maps and then you try to find them and do some research on them. And then we go explore. Me and my friends would just either backpack in or drive in and find these old ghost towns, read the history. And what was important about that for me is that it had nothing to do with fighting. So it gave me some kind of balance in my life outside of my family. But it was an activity that I did that had nothing to do with fighting. I still do. And everything to do with kind of learning history and seeing these amazing places that are melting back into the desert. So it was cathartic for me, but it was also just so much fun. Still is.
So just that you feel what do you feel when you go to these places?
What a great question. For me, there's so many mixed emotions. First of all, it's excitement that I found it, because a lot of these places they're very hard to find. And then there's always like a profound excitement. It's like bittersweet with loss, because you think about all the people, and some towns have been around for generations before, the Great Depression hit or whatever. So there's like a sense of loss for me there. There's a sense of gain that I come and I'm experiencing it. But then you see like how hard these people had to work, and this was their life there. And now nature's reclaiming it. So there's this sense of loss in addition to this sense of gain. It's such an emotional experience. I think it's one of the things that makes me an addict for it, is that you have all of these emotions there. And I always try to imagine, who are these people? Who are these, maybe second, third generation from Spain, raising their sheep and trying to eke out a living out here. How brave they were, how tough. It's just trying to imagine. It really helped my mind work, trying to imagine what life was like then, what life was like for those people. And then the loss when they, their kids left, they had to leave, and there's nothing left. It's just an amazing experience.
Cool. You feel a lot. Do you go by yourself, or do you go with who do you go? Do you go with?
I usually go with people. I'll take usually my best friend Mike Helvey will go with me, and I take my kids now. Obviously, my dad used to go with me a lot. Jim Dudley used to go with me a lot. So there's a little contingent of us, but sometimes I'll go by myself too if I just want to quietly experience it without saying words. I'll go by myself as well.
Cool. Very cool. Interesting. I've never really talked to you about it after all these. It's been like 20 years or plus 20 years, right? Probably.
Right.
You've been doing these things, so it's really cool to hear some more about it, and especially being now a little bit older, right?
Right.
Experience. Well, Greg, congratulations for everything you've accomplished. For everything you've given to the sport, to martial arts, the MMA sport, but also to grappling. What an inspiration, from, white kid growing up in the South Valley. I would say Albuquerque is a small town, small, big town, right? But small town, from New Mexico and making it like the fight capital of almost in the world, right? Fight capital of the world, bringing the who's who and bringing so much prestige and attention to the city. You know, I mean, what a story! What a story! What a legendary story! Movies have been you've been inspired movies by your you know, I mean, when I saw that Warrior movie, and then I saw how they modeled that was like since I stayed in your house and the classical music on, you know, all the things they really followed you, they really lived with you, and to kind of see that, and it was all around the same time that the guy started winning championships and you being voted like coach of the year, and I didn't maybe have a hat on, but I took my hat off, you know, back then. Wow. And so it's and thank you for what you've done for me, you know.
Get out of here. The other way around, man.
Just publicly kind of just say that, you know, like for so many free privates, anytime, anywhere. Hey, free? Yes, let's do it, you know. And I'm not the only one. It's like the whole community. And so, yeah, you know, there's people like get jealous and whatever else, you know, from, you know, it's how it is, right? People are like
sure,
that,
of course.
But you've given so much to myself, and I mean, you got me going to fight, and I never thought I would fight MMA, you know.
Get out of here, brother. Listen, I learned way more from you in those privates than you learned from me. Trust me on that one.
Yeah, I did my first fight because I was at your gym. It was some early morning, training on those white mats, you know, those fold-out mats, and King of the Cage called you. And I was like, oh, King of the Cage is coming to town. You're like, yeah, they're coming to town. I was like, oh, I think I'd be interested in fighting. I just gotten my black belt, and you're like, and so I think you put us in touch, and that was kind of the beginning for me to start fighting professionally, because I never thought I would. But you had a platform, you had a team. You know, I was just a jiu-jitsu guy, and then just, you know, fast forward, you know, like, the amount of work and the team that you guys developed back in those early days. I mean, not even now, it's just a whole animal, but I'm sure the basics are the basics, right?
Yeah.
But just game planning and how much brain and, you know, thought into every single piece. Like I remember, like, you know, when I fought Javi Vasquez, we had guys like watching him, recording him before tournaments, you know, seeing what he was warming up with.
yeah, we were all in. That's for sure. We were all in.
And that was just me, right? So many other people, you know, along the way. So many years. Oh my God, 28 years of
crazy, huh?
Contributing and helping people, you know, reach their best. And it's just really, really great to just catch up a little bit. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, get out of here! Thank you, man.
And for everything you've done for just all of the community, and that includes, you know, grappling and jiu-jitsu as well.
Well, I was just lucky to have a lot of amazing people helping me out at the right time. And so I was lucky I got in early, and lucky people like you would take 5 minutes out of their day to show me a cool new move, man. I could never, like, the gift that martial arts has given me, I get all choked up, but the gift that martial arts has given me is so small compared to what I've given back to it. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, brother. And you're still going strong. I love to see it, brother. I love to see it. You are an inspiration too. Hey, anybody's listening, don't let this guy fool you. He's as tough as they come and an amazing fighter. Don't let him fool you. He's nice now with a smile. This guy will get you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
No worries, brother. Take care.